Hello there, YouTube. Turan Han here, and finally I'm starting to record Dune Spice Wars. I want to cover this game. I'm really excited for it. Um, I do have some nitpicks and so on. It's not perfect yet, but it's an early access, and I'm really excited about its future. I've been following JumboPixel a lot. He covered the game really well. I actually left a number of comments and so on about how I see where the game is. I have a pretty old. Not old, but a long history with Dune as a game, and a even longer as the Dune as books. I read all the books. I read all the Dune and all the Frank Herbert's books. I even read Brian Herbert's, and I think there was another author with him. I forget Anderson. I think Brian Anderson. Or I'm forgetting the names, but I read the prequels as well. So I really like the prequels. Actually, it sets up a lot why the Dune universe is so unique, and I think that's a lot of people do not get. And it really one of my sort of hidden, not hidden, but like one of my other wants and desires is for a Dune game, but set before the Dune, basically covering the Butlerian Jihad, covering why the Dune universe is against machines, thinking machines. I don't know. I like that anti-AI and other sort of stance, and how, for example, factions like the Spacing Guild and Colm came to be. So then we get to play other factions. Atreides and Harkonnen are still there, but there'll be a more focus on other new factions. So I don't know. For me, prequels are pretty good as well, and I would like to see a game delving to that. But anyways, before I get there, the first Dune game I played was actually the old Dune in 2000. I remember I played it on my uncle's or aunt's computer, and you had to put I remember you had to put concrete, not only to stop on the sandstone or on the rock outcroppings to build any of your buildings and to stop the worms popping up, but also enemy subterranean vehicles coming. So if you don't put it, they can actually shallow subterranean, which is kind of like a gameplay element that they used from Tiberian Sun. Nod had these subterranean APCs, and I think actually Nod copied that from the older Dune game. I played all the Dune games. I played Dune 2000. I played the latest one was Battle Emperor for Dune. So that's actually why I like Battle Emperor for Dune. Mainly because of the cinematics. The gameplay was like a lot of people said. It has tanks, it has artillery. The bases have a lot more outcroppings. There are sand in between, but it's more like a base defense and base capture, the usual typical RTS. And that's a little of what I'm missing. And when I watched Angry Joe show's review, and Angry Joe, I agree with Angry Joe show, and you're saying to me that 5 or 6 infantry is all I got. That's it. And you really need at least 2 or 3, at least 3 to 4 to take out. Most villages have 3 to 4 militia defending them, so you can't just roll with just 2 units there unless they're very elite late units. And but that's I'm kind of getting into my points. I don't usually put reviews up, but I put a review up. I want to read through it to kind of show what my thoughts are. Then I want to go over some strategy. The best strategy so far I've scoured on the net, and then eventually this gameplay will be. I think I'll be restarting and doing a run as a new smuggler faction, because I played it once but I didn't go to endgame with it. I kind of got pwned in the beginning with not paying the taxes. So I want to do that better. I did a longer Harkonnen game, but there again I lost to politics, because at the end the House Atreides had for 60 days, and I didn't realize that. I thought I was actually surprised why they're winning. They already got the Dune governorship, but apparently they have to hold it for 60 days. So what I should have done in that playthrough is attack their main building and just destroy it, because I had a lot of military. I have really strong military, and I just really still think in terms of gameplay, macro, and so on, Harkonnen are the easiest to play. Because they're kind of the easiest for military like victory. But again, even in the Harkonnen playthrough, which I did wrong was I only built the latest tier units. I didn't really utilize the unit synergies, which in this playthrough I want to do that more. And Smugglers especially, I think, really benefit and are dependent on that. And I'll explain that more. But first I want to jump into this little review here that I have. And my biggest thing which I would like to see next is deeper military. My number one complaint, granted I'm an Emperor Battle for Dune fan, is that the military limitation to only effectively infantry. While the infantry have good synergies, and I sort of get the direction they're going for, that they're more closer and correct in game. For example, in the books, the Atreides colors are black, gold, and green. It's never blue. That's actually one of the issues I had with all previous Dune games. They had that blue as a because it was Command and Conquer, and because they have this Red Alert sort of legacy where the Democratic or the good faction is blue, whether it's USA or GDI, and then of course they made that shade is blue. While the bad faction or the evil faction, the Soviets, Nod, and Harkonnen were bred. That's just kind of a legacy from that team. But if you look actually in the books, the regalia for Atreides is green, black, and gold. So actually I like that change, and I'm all for that, but that's just faction colors. But what I'd like to see some more tanks, artillery, and aircraft incorporated into the military roster. So for example, the missile turret positioning that can sometimes cover two villages, JumboPixel did a good coverage of that, but with a slower long-range artillery military units placement can try to defend two villages if you place on rock outcroppings, or if there are more rock outcroppings in the desert, but they're small. So and I think with more smarter map generation, you could have some good rock outcroppings for artillery. Because another thing which I've noticed in late game, and actually in Angry Joe Show's coverage, he said like at end game it gets very difficult to attack a really defended place with like two missile turrets, the best militia, like Atreides have veteran militia, which is even stronger than heavy militia, and their troops there too. So like you're fighting not just the 3 or 4 veteran militia there, but plus 5 or more Atreides units. It becomes you don't have the mass with just your commands. Like you can only have like at most like 7, 8 units. I don't think you can have like 10 or more. Because each unit is actually it takes more of the command points. So then it becomes at late game to attack a very fortified position is almost impossible without operations. So the only way you can win that is with operations, by having poison supplies, having more supplies for your own supply drop to heal, or the atomics. I actually haven't used atomics, and that's another thing I want to try out as the Smugglers or any like faction, to see how it will affect. But my main thing is that I kind of miss the artillery, especially I played when I played with House Ordos, for example. Their strongest vehicle was not a tank; it's actually artillery. It was long range, and it definitely changed the game play style for Ordos versus Harkonnen. But of course, to allow for that, you would need tank artillery would need larger battle spaces, so rock outcroppings need to increase in map generation. So more on that later in the map generation points 5 and 6 below. But again, I found there's too much sand and not enough rock or rock outcroppings. For example, it'd be nice to have like a ring or like an archipelago of smaller outcroppings on the edges of the city, so then you could play snipers there, artillery, so it could be more tactical in how you approach. Because what the problem I found, in order to avoid the worms, you had to put your even range support units like wreckers or snipers or rangers and gunners or heavy weapon squads, you had to put them like get them like all bunched up right on top of the city in order to avoid the worm attacking you. But if you had more, some, not all of them, but some villages have more rock outcropping land in general, which actually in the latest builds I've seen, some regions are almost all rock outcropping. So I think hidden, they've already done that, because in the first build which I played, the rock outcropping, which is buildable area or where you not safe from worms, was very, very small. In some villages, it was like it didn't matter. Like if I was on the village, the route outcropping was so small, the what's it called? The worm appeared right almost under the city. I'm like, okay, that's definitely a glitch, but that happened. So again, that's just map generation. I'll get to that again, but then again. You see how the game is so already elegantly, I would say, gracefully built, that if they just tinker with those map and region generation settings, they can create some very more fun and replayable gameplay, especially if they add tanks, artillery, or heavier, basically vehicles, or that will be optimizing and exploiting that worm-free land. But then you could always make it more balanced, that if you have more route outcroppings, maybe it has more chance for earthquakes or lava. So again, keeping that danger element of the planet, the survivor element, which I really love, which actually was kind of missing in most Dune games, but I want to see more of it. Not just sandstorms, I want to see earthquakes, lava, or something. Go a bit more in that civilization sort of a dive. Also, I want units to cost less command. And it's just, it doesn't have to be drastic, but I really think you should have, especially if you're playing. The problem is really exacerbated when you play on higher difficulty settings and on large maps, which I haven't seen most YouTubers yet tackle, and I'm trying to go do that. In this playthrough, I'm going to crank up all the difficulties. I'm going to see, I've seen it a little bit with my prior testing, but this is going to be a real run of it, is how that affects, and you really need to have multiple fronts. And you just don't have the command points to do that. So it needs to be just bumped a little bit. But for example, at least have 2 or 3 by end game able to hold 3 or 4 main fronts. More than that will be too much, but less than that. Otherwise, I can only hold one front at a time. At the same time, it's kind of interesting that you get pushed from other things. Like I say here, I don't like that most of my villagers are only defending my militia. Very tough to have a defensive or an offensive force. All it's end up being right now, the meta, is one big ball of infantry moving across the map slowly. There was no meta way to actually have multiple fronts. But when you introduce stuff like more vehicles or aircraft, you have to have more like standardized maybe fronts. Take a page from Gladius, another really good game, 4X game. Well, it's actually not a 4X, there's no diplomacy, but it just does the battling good. I guess I wanted something like Gladius, Warhammer 40k, Relics of War, but we get a more Dune is better, I think, as not as a pure military, but I think they could take a lot of inspiration and ideas from Gladius, because Gladius has been me and my brother have played that multiplayer with different factions, mods, and like we're modded, for example, white cards factions, stuff like that. That's another thing which I would love to see, more mods, more factions and so on. But it's probably just a one slow, boring moving front. And any other front where other factions are pushing you, you auto lose because militia suck, because they will take it over, because by that time, by end game, they have late game units. This problem only exacerbates if there's more factions added down the line, which would add more venue, theaters, and regions to be raided from. The second point, fixed airports. I actually will scratch that. That was me not understanding how airports work. That's actually, again, in this air playthrough, I'm going to try to make airports work for me, because, I need to move troops faster. But ignore all this. I didn't know how they work before. They actually do go how I read the tooltip, that So with any airport that you have that region, you can travel to that region. But what I don't know yet is, does your home region, your first main base, does it act as an airport or not, or do you need in one of the close regions to build an airport? So that's something I need to fix. Another thing about airports, I think airport right now is kind of serve only one purpose, but one purpose which I would love to see was adding more vehicles, but adding aircraft, because I was kind of a little bit miffed, a bit frustrated or pissed that Ornithopters, this classic iconic unit for the Dune universe, is only a scout, and that's it. It does have fighting, but I've never seen people use it as a fighting unit. But to have an attack Ornithopter, so change up the meta. For example, if I want to open up with 2 airports and rush to attack Ornithopters right off the bat, then I could use those Ornithopters to attack the harvesters, the enemy harvesters, destroy them. They probably would not be strong enough to attack the base, but maybe with some upgrades like rocket upgrades or enough massive attack helicopters, I even can take out a missile battery or something or attack the base. But that kind of opening is kind of cool, kind of a more StarCrafty opening where it's like, yes, I don't have any troops on the ground, but I am denying them spice, and right off the bat, if they can't get spice fast enough, and I deny them spice, especially to like Atreides or if I'm Harkonnen and so on, like the main like Nemesis, then they might miss their first shipment and they're already starting the downward spiral or down in the middle. For example, that earlier stalemate which I mentioned. For example, I couldn't get through this Atreides base with 2 artilleries, 2 missiles, things so on. But one or more of their spice regions might have no missile batteries, and they'll be perfect pickings for an attack Ornithopter raid. So that's a way to break stalemates, and I think that's what this game sorely needs right now in very late game, to break stalemates. Another thing which I think about Ornithopters is of course limit their cap, how many, they're fuel dependent and so on, so that adds more onus for you to get the fuel regions. Yeah, like what else I want to say? Oh yeah, expanded buildings meta. At 500, all 5 slots are filled, and the village cannot grow anymore. But I would argue that it should be upgradable to a city. Fine, put a cap on how many cities you have, but it's kind of I find it very like it's the current single only the origin of starting city having development of districts feels very not 4x to me. So I would like to open up the district bonuses, maybe make it only 25% of half of what the origin is, but it will reward for developing a village fully. In special regions, for example, where a siege would provide 100% maintenance for all buildings, that region is like prime candidate for having it to be made into a city, especially if there's unique resources, spice, minerals, rare earths. Then that region would take priority over a region with no siege or no unique resources or nothing at all. Another thing about this, which I'm going to try in this playthrough, again, reading like inputs, it's make it more clear by on the faction screen and so on which factions could grow tall, and I really think Smugglers more than even Harkonnen is just so steady, but they can cover the map. But Smugglers, I think, they benefit from not covering the map. For example, in this Smuggler playthrough, what I'm going to do differently, which I did before I was taking regions which weren't even helping me. Like they didn't have spies, they didn't have any resource. The only thing they had maybe was good wind, so good water. But let's say it doesn't even have good wind. It's basically an empty region. Before, what I would do, I would use that to put like adjacency stuff. I would put, if that region is connecting to other regions, I would put the maintenance center, get the minus 30%. But let's say it's at the edge of your map. It's not helping in adjacency in any way. Before, what I would do, I would settle it and get at least something out of it. But now what I would do, especially if it's like in the there's no adjacencies or nearby, what I would do, I would pillage it. And I actually think, and this is one big thing which I haven't seen, which I think it's a UI issue, needs to be changed. But different factions gain hegemony, the score, by different means. And that boggles my mind is why is that information not on the faction screen? It's actually not on the faction screen. I'm gonna spell it out for you. But for example, smugglers gain hegemony the fastest by pillaging settlements, villages. And it's not on the faction screen. It's actually only when you're in game, you hit the hegemony icon score. Only then it spells it out for you that you actually gain hegemony the fastest by pillaging. And that information having available in the UI as early as possible on the faction screen really then highlights some counselors versus others. For example, the counselor that helps pillaging even more, that kind of builds a stronger synergy, and now I see him as essential to smuggler play. So actually right now, just recently I saw JumboPixel started a new smuggler. He's kind of on the same page as me. He's trying to see how smugglers could be used better for putting underground markets, which I didn't do at all last game, which is, again, I'm not using the mechanic as smuggler. So this time I'm gonna try to go 2 or even 3 ornithopters to really scout. Smugglers, I need to know where the others are to gauge which regions of them to siphon off, or all of them. And he went with, I think, the one with the water cellar. But the water cellar one is almost better. That counselor almost better fits the Fremen, because the Fremen have how the way they get hegemony score is having water. It's having the more water they have, the more it is. That's why in the game, when you start off, the score for the Fremen is much higher than others, because their original city, or the origin city, starts with more water, and that's a lore reason, because in the game and in the books, the Fremen were stockpiling water, they had kinds and so on, in order to terraform the planet. They already had a plan in place. Okay, I kind of went too much here, but you get the point that to really improve and increase 4X capabilities of this game, of this title, there should be cities available. Villages should be upgradable to cities, and of course you can cap the number of cities, it's only 50% of the development of your origin or something like that. Moving on to my fourth point, more factions. Just 4 is way too limiting, either for free or by DLC, and they did apparently announce there's going to be one new faction during early access phase, and one faction right at the release. So that's good, they're increasing to 2. But that's, I'm going to say just my opinion, I'd love to see the following: House Corino, House X, Bean Tleilax, Bean Jezerit, and Sardaukar. You could argue that Sardaukar and House Corino could be in one. I see it. But I kind of see Sardaukar as an independent force. Yeah, they're loyal to the Emperor, but if the Emperor changes or loses, they're actually a military caste, kind of like the Fedaykin will become, of their own. Of course, like Fedaykin, yeah, they're part of Fremen. So, yeah, I could see Sardaukar being just House Corino. Again, people might say, oh, why House Corino, their emperor, they wouldn't get involved. But they have, for example, Princess Irulan and other characters who may be, for example, how I could see it happening. Because right now, one big thing which I see, like, House Atreides is so far diplomatically that there's not really a force against them. I'm going to try to play smugglers more diplomatically, try to siphon all that influence away from Atreides next game, but it may not work. But I really see House Corino, even more than House Harkonnen, putting a dampener on how popular House Atreides is. And that makes sense from the books, because the main reason Shaddam Corino sent House Atreides because Duke Atreides was getting too popular. And that's another kind of thing they don't count here, which I want to see more reflected. Duke Atreides is a Duke. If you look by, like, Crusader Kings by titles, Duke is a higher title than a Baron. So there you have at the lowest level, you have a Count in charge of a county. Then you have a Baron in charge of counts who hold counties. But over a Baron, you have Dukes who have baronies. And over a Duke, you have a kingdom. So I want that a little bit more pronounced in the beginning, that House Harkonnen is actually a lower standing house, because he's just a Baron, not a Duke. And also, I would really love how House X and Tleilax, because in the books, and especially in the prequels, Tleilaxu are basically like invading X and trying to take it over. X is very technologically oriented. Tleilaxu is very biologically oriented. And I think having those two houses in game they're like diametrical enemies, just like Atreides versus Harkonnen. So having them duke it out will be very fun to see. Now, Bene Gesserit are kind of more interesting. They're kind of a bit weird. There is already in Fremen one counselor is Saidina, and basically a rogue mother. So it'll be interesting to see some interactions of them trying to get her back to the fold, trying to indoctrinate her again, or have her as a even even more spy and spy game than Smugglers, because Smugglers do it to a level, but I really see the most espionage heavy are the Bene Gesserit. So that'll be very interesting to see. And even though the following factions are already included in the spin-off screen, I still be excited to play the following: Spacing Guild, Colm, and Lensrad. Especially the first two, Spacing Guild and Colm, as I alluded earlier. I would like to see in a pre-Dune world, basically the prequel world, basically how they came to be, and that because then it would make more sense. In a little less here, but still, I would like to see how that would look. Finally, we get to the map generation and more unique regional effects. Map generation. What if I want an almost sandless but craggy, more Sahara-like Arrakis? This way the worm are almost not a threat, but instead storms and earthquake and lava are, like I alluded to. Also, this rock grouping, like 90% or high on the map of buildable worms, would open up more epic battles for more heavier tanks, vehicles, or artillery. Or have a more of a balance. It's just right now there's way too little sand cropping to do a more tactical thing, or opposite, make it so the most of the world is sand and really punish the player and have a more survivable game mode. So kind of like in Fallout 4 or Skyrim, to have you worry more about the elements of the world than other factions. Lastly, more unique regional effects. All games so far, they have this one polar ice cap, and it again from the games, well, there should be only one polar ice cap, but you can rename it, you can finagle to do a site, but it's just in the middle of the map all the time, and you get ownership of and when you take ownership of that region, it takes care of basically all your water problems for the playthrough, and gives you a whopping 1k hegemony score. That's just too much. I think compared to other regions, this region is too powerful. I think it needs to be scaled back. Maybe 25 to 33% of itself, and maybe have 3 or 4 more of these sprinkled throughout the map, so there's more of these sort of geysers, whatever you want to call them, to give you a big boost to water. So a single faction may eventually control 4, but not immediately. Just otherwise, it becomes like a zigzag. That's why Atreides in my last Harkonnen game had it for the longest time, and it just propelled them. But at the same time, these kind of regions really propel the Fremen, because the more water they have, the higher the score. So it gives you strategies as other factions like Smugglers to deny the Fremen these regions. Then they can't snowball as hard. And that's all I have of my points here of what I think about the gameplay, what I would like it to go next. Now I would like to cover actually this guides, and actually when I'm gonna follow this actually I read this after the Harkonnen. It's on culturedvultures.com. I actually linked it in my comment to JumboPixel, but in this video I'll have it under the description so you guys can follow for all the 4 factions. Shout out to Maxim Close Ivanov on April 25th, 2022. Again, Cultured Vultures. He did a really good rundown. I'm just gonna read it to you so you have knowledge, because I'm gonna start a Smugglers gameplay and how it answered one question which I was confused before, but now it's answered. But anyways, Dune Spice Wars will have players vying for control over Arrakis, the most important planet of the Imperium that produces a critical spice, resource spice melange actually. The Imperial House of Atreides and Harkonnen aren't the only ones vying for control. Other forces of opportunity, such as the Smugglers, seek to carve out their own place in the universe through economic connection and cunning operations. Here's everything you should know about the Smugglers and Dune Spice Wars. So the features and abilities. Smugglers, just like Harkonnens, are very economically inclined. But unlike the brutal Imperial House that focuses on economic gain through exploitation, the oppression mechanic, smugglers prefer trickier and complicated means of earning profit. They do this with their unique underworld headquarters mechanic, where the smuggler faction can build smaller bases in villages controlled by other factions. So if you play Total War, that's basically a feature of the pirates of the sea of the Vampire Coast and other factions where they can put Vampire Coast in other factions' ports. Kind of similar. Each headquarters offers 2 building slots, and you can place a variety of buildings that give you economic, military, or stately benefits. I actually haven't ever used them, so next playthrough I would be the first time exploring it. What I've seen so far is economic gives you just a lot of Solari, stately steals their influence, which I will definitely use. Military I will use less, but for example, if I see a Atreides or Harkonnen spice field kind of close to my regions and makes sense to conquer, I would not go economic or stately buildings. The two, I'd make both military to make it take it over easier, especially if they have Harkonnen can have more militia, so they could have up to I think 5 or even 6, and with 2 missile batteries, having an underworld headquarters with military debuffs on them would be very helpful. So again, that's a very cool way to break the stalemate. Okay, being such adepts at market interactions, having a vast array of contacts, the smugglers have improved relations with Arrakis black markets, points of interest that ornithopters can service. This is another thing that I did not do in my earlier first smugglers playthrough. I basically didn't even notice them or use them. So again, I need to try to exploit them and use them as early as possible. These black markets contacts let the smugglers acquire Solpice or Solari, depending on what the strategic situation calls for, meaning you don't necessarily have to rely on your own villages for resource production. So basically you get a market at a favorable rate, kind of like Age of Empires 2 Saracens or Age of Empires 4 like landmark for the Rus, what's it called, the high trade building or something. Meaning you don't necessarily have to rely on your villages, okay, instead choosing to interact with the world and siphon resources from others. Since the smugglers aren't exactly officially recognized by the Landsraad, this faction initially has no access to council resolutions until reaching 5k hegemony, when the smugglers get 50 votes to use in the Landsraad Council. So before the 50 votes, you have to use influence. However, the smugglers can place bounties on specific resolutions, another thing I haven't done much, to incentivize and sway the opinion of other factions to vote for resolutions most beneficial to you before officially joining the Landsraad. Also, at the same level of hegemony, you get an access to a separate contraband offers mechanic, which opens up further economic options. At 10k point hegemony threshold, smugglers gain the option to recruit mercenary units. I even didn't get that far. I'm really excited to use them. That are themselves stronger than the baseline troops of the various factions without having to research the technology that normally unlocks these units. Not only do you get them without research, but smuggler mercenaries come with a bonus of 20% to their strength. So they're just strong. They should beat all other mercenaries, but maybe the other ultimate tier units like Fedaykin, House Guard, Warden could give them a bang for their buck. Counselors. The first of the smaller counselor is Taban Tuek. They improve the resource reproduction of your underworld headquarters, specifically Solari and Influence. However, these bonuses are related to the position of these outputs in relation to each other, so effective positioning is critical to use Staban's effects. So here, even though he does look good and he does buff underworld headquarters, which is core mechanic of the smugglers, what I worry is that what I've seen is that especially like on smaller maps, I think this would be better. This would be almost a go-to because then there's not many regions to go. But on a large map, I really don't think AI clumps them together as much. I actually seen them like have gaps and they go for like important resources first. Even Atreides, which with their diplomatic or peaceful annexation, they can they can really cover the map, or Harkonnen, but Harkonnen will take their time, while Atreides can really paint the map quickly. But even Atreides kind of skips some regions, which will hurt this positioning. Anyway, Lingard Butte aids in the smuggler's ability to claim new land based on the faction's water protections. So again, if I go with this counselor, I have to almost beeline for that polar ice cap or just have a lot of water, because as soon as I have that polar ice cap region or similar, then the water production, this is really powerful, but only once you have that unique region. And Lingard Butte almost makes more sense in the roster of the Fremen. Imagine Lingard Butte as a council in the Fremen. Then Fremen he'll be just a default pick always, because he just gels so much with their hegemony score. How they get score is through more water. And if you get that region which gets like I don't know, it's like something like 300 or something crazy amount of water with a water extractor, which is a unique building for that region. Depending on the overall positive level of water production, the authority connects cost to annex villages and build underworld headquarters goes down. Oh, I guess I see now. So he enables that to go even faster. Monopolizing valuable water production, which is the special regions, can help with your expansion. So that's interesting. Maybe he does make sense. He basically makes smugglers into more of an expensive. So I don't know. I kind of still like him. Drisk is your head intelligence officer, gets all recruited agents in merchant trade, which increases salary generation, essentially making each of your agents a money producer. Also, Drisk ensures that all administration levels across organizations would never drop below 1, which helps agents in mission and increase resource productivity. Pretty good, but still weaker than this guy. And Smuggler's War Leader Banerjee buffs the faction's pillaging potential by increasing overall resource generation from pillage action. In addition to a simple increase in resources, Banerjee also lets Smugglers gain modest amounts of plascrete, which is their resource material, per raid on top of the usual salary loot. Now I kind of see Banerjee as very needed for to really help you get score for hegemony. If you're not going for hegemony, then Banerjee is not as important. So yeah, I'm kind of gonna struggle between which two I pick here, but yeah, I'll think more about this. But I'm right now just reading this very useful guide. Now, this army roster was really helpful for me, and strategy also. But in army roster, opened up my eyes to how much synergy is required. The overall way of war for the smuggler is a mix of the Atreides synergy-based target, focused tactic, and a healthy dose of skirmishing and effective use of terrain. Many of the smuggler's troops have effects that increase the supply drain of enemy units, meaning if they tire them out and lead them into hostile terrain, which is kiting the enemy out in the dunes, then you can let the environment do most of the work for you. Smuggler troops typically lack much armor or ways to increase their durability. Scavengers are the basic frontline unit of the smaller faction and have similar characteristics to the Harkonnen troopers, except for their special ability. This unit will gain a 10% regeneration buff for every nearby defeated enemy unit. I think they changed it. I think it's something every time, but it's pretty close, which can stack up to 5 times. This can work to increase their durability in a prolonged fight, again kiting, if you're able to quickly defeat enemy units or give just enough health regeneration to help you disengage in one piece. Perhaps the most important unit in the Smugglers roster is the Wrecker. And last time I had no Wreckers, which is terrible. This time I'm going to make sure I have at least one Wrecker. A demolition unit with area damage, the Wrecker comes with a crucial defect, which defines how the rest of the Smuggler army performs. Wrecker grenades cause a contamination effect on the target, which increases the target's unit supply drain by 50%, so their supply drains faster. And then pair that especially with poison supplies, I think we're going to get some real good numbers, which can absolutely devastate any of the units away from friendly territory. This means smuggler wreckers can throw grenades at a target and run away to more favorable ground and let the lack of supplies eat away at their opponent's army. Again, more tactical, but right now the map doesn't really support that. That's why I'm arguing for more smaller rock outcroppings on the edges of the village, because right now we can't really kite too well. I'm gonna try, but that's another bad thing. Is like if you attack, it's really hard for smugglers. Unlike Harkonnen, they don't prefer like big assaults. But sometimes you have to just assault a region with 2 missile batteries, full militia, and their army there. Then it becomes really tough without any operations or any like support like that. Benefiting from low enemy supplies, the Smuggler Sniper unit is the roster's main damage dealer. They're a typical glass cannon unit with little armor and low health, but they gain additional strengths based on the target's missing amount of supplies, not health, supplies. So they can easily speed along the death of a unit running on low supply and away from infernal territory. Getting the combat drone, that's another big thing I haven't done. I just went to the strongest unit, but combat drone, again, at least one of each unit applies the debuffs, and I think that's the more combined force I'm gonna go with in this playthrough. The combat drone is when the smugglers can get more serious with their combat operations. This unit has better health and armor than the basic infantry units, though it still benefits from the enemy's lack of supplies to fight even better. The combat drone will get an additional 30 strength if its target had the supplies at half or less. Again, so it becomes a pretty good damaging unit. Finally, the quintessential assassin unit, the Free Company, gains a massive strength boost of up to 50% to its already high strength based on the target's missing health. But the missing health is helped by all these other units when the supply is less. They may not be the unit to initiate combat, but the Free Company should surely be the ones to finish the fight. They also have camouflage to stay hidden and get into position for the killing blow. That's another thing which I need to do more. And with Nod, I said Nod, no. Harkonnen unit, what was it? Or not the Wrecker, not the Gunner. The one that's like a little more stealthy, is that you have to attack at the right time. Before I was just getting them into one ball and just rushing, and it kind of worked against militia, but it doesn't work against faction units. Alright, finally, strategy. While the smugglers could do for a political victory through the Landsraad Council, once they get access to it, they'll be at a general disadvantage to pursue this type of victory compared to the Imperial houses. I'm trying to kind of see if it's opposite, just like JumboPixel. I'm going to try to siphon influence from Atreides and really hurt them that way and help my influence. So we'll see how that goes. As such, the smugglers are perfectly geared for a hegemony victory. That's why pillaging is so important. And that's why I think Banerjee Counselor is almost a must, because then I really think that, because I didn't have Banerjee last game too, I didn't even pillage at all once. So really I was playing not to the strengths of my faction. And they're a unique unit and easy way of additional hegemony, pillage settlements. See, before I didn't understand that, I'm like, where are they coming from? I looked at the faction description, did not get it, and finally on the recent JumboPixel video where he was talking about balance, one person comment, I think I still have it somewhere, was basically, guys, look at the hegemony. It's not advertised, but it should be. It should be up on the faction screen. The way you get hegemony score is pillage settlements. So this guy is on top of it. I was like, where is he getting this? Like, why? Like, even when I was looking at the council, I'm like, pillage settlements? It seems kind of productive for a smuggler faction who wants more peace, but it looks like the smuggler faction is not really peaceful in the way they're kind of like bandits. But yeah, just like in the description, they're a fine line between a bandit and a deal broker. Yeah, which it's very fun gameplay. That's why I want to try smugglers again. The smuggler army is purpose-built for this style of hit and run, micro-intensive skirmish tactics, where the goal isn't to defeat the main core of an army, but to harass it, break it apart, and force it into the desert, where a lack of supplies will do all the work for you. So I really have to try to get them out from the map and away from missile battery damage, maybe even. So diplomatically, the faction can benefit from being friends with everybody. That's interesting, but ensuring there are always neutral or helpless villages to continuously pillage your way to victory. In regard to territory, if the Harkonnens want to expand but steadily at a modest pace, the smugglers are the least expansionist faction of the four. As the more territory they control, the fewer potential pillaging targets they have. And another thing to consider, you can't just pillage, like in Total War, you could, one tactic Legends of Total War uses, i.e. almost everybody who's playing Legend or higher than very hard uses, is you choose one faction minor, OPM, and they only have that one region left, and you keep sacking them. Even when they don't give you any gold or whatever anymore, they're still giving you the same XP. And Total War never addressed that. I kept telling them they should have fewer diminishing returns or something. They never did that. But it's kind of similar here. I did notice, yeah, once you pillage, I think I pillaged once as Harkonnen, is that you can pillage again on not the same turn, but immediately after. The village has to kind of come back to a pillageable level. And that means you need to, as smugglers, you can't just have one or two in your back pocket to have your your kind of pinatas to bang upon. You actually have to have more, but that means also, again, why I think command points matter. I need a pillaging army then, like separate from my pushing army or defending army. Yeah, it seems like my army will be quite pushed for around the map, and that means I need airports even more for smugglers than I do even for Harkonnen. Harkonnen arguably don't even need airports if they expand correctly, expand where have like tight points, choke points, or so on. Because of this lack of, so for claiming land, it's advisable to be pickier than even the Harkonnens and take control of the most prized and valuable regions. That means, again, with smugglers, I'm going to be just, it's going to be my sort of modus operandi. Like, even if it costs me adjacency, I will not get the regions that have nothing to offer me. For example, wind of 1 or 2, and no special resources, and no sieges to take over. That's basically in smuggler terms, that's pillage land. Okay, because of this lack of territory, you'll need to find alternate ways to earn resources, which is where diplomacy, black markets, again, I need to use black markets. I still don't have a use for them, which I will do. I should be swimming in Solari, so what I should be doing is taking that Solari and trading it for whatever I need. And Underworld headquarters come into play. Pillaging will provide a good book of Solari, but not much else. So again, you should be swimming in Solari. So you'll need to spend your hard-earned cash on trading with other factions to make up whatever you lack. That's another thing JumboPixel touched on, which I really agree with. Currently, you can trade with a faction and they'll give you gold or Solari or whatever you need, as long as you make the arrows go up, even if they have no regions left and you're assaulting their last holding. So they need to change that. They need to. I don't think that's a hard AI to change. It's basically a very simple if statement. Like, if you have less than so regions around your base and your base is being attacked, you stop all trading, or you trade at a favorable level where it's like you trade influence or something immaterial for something material. Like, you need plastic now, you need manpower now, you need gold now just to survive. You can do away with your intangibles, which is like influence. What's the other one? Influence, something intelligence, espionage. Yeah. So like, I would like to see that. I would like to see if I'm like destroying. If Harkonnens have no regions left, they will trade, but they'll trade tactically. They'll trade their influence. They'll trade their espionage, whatever. Votes, whatever, for more plastic just to survive against me, even. So, yeah, that needs to be improved. Black markets will help with obtaining the necessary spice, bribes, and taxes, while the Underworld headquarters, spice, bribes, and taxes, while the Underworld headquarters can siphon resources from the regions you've placed them in. This comes to the most important element of smuggler strategy, situational awareness. While reconnaissance is valuable generally, for this faction is even more vital, especially I would say early on. You need to find the other factions, otherwise you can't even place Underworld factions. So one big mistake I did before, in my first playthrough, I didn't really prioritize counting or finding the other factions, so I couldn't even put my Underworld factions because I didn't have enemy villages to insert or infiltrate. So I think for smugglers, again, even more than Harkonnen, like Harkonnen is probably least, but you really need scouting. As knowing where valuable regions are and where enemy forces are coming from are all paramount to success and survival as the smugglers to deploy your forces to raid and your underworld headquarters for maximum resource gain. Actually, for late game, I did see sometimes the tradies would take these long treks, mostly through the territory, but because AI is not so good, parts of it will be in the bad, like the high wind, empty regions where it's just sand, and that is the perfect time to strike at them. Of course, Fremen with their worm, with their thumper, will be the best, but if I have a network of airfields, especially on the front lines, I could catch some of those traveling armies and already are being affected by supply. I think that's a gameplay of the smuggler. It's actually even more hit and run than what's it called? Than Fedaykin, than Fremen, because Fremen is actually kind of like Harkonnen. They are better fighting up front, and just they don't care. They're just strong enough. Like Fedaykin, the more enemies they fight, the stronger they are. So like in that stalemate which I described in the beginning, Fedaykin will be the perfect unit. Anyway, yeah, the smaller faction argues the funkiest and off-kilter power at play on Arrakis due to its underhanded and curveball approaches to the game's mechanics, but also I would argue the most fun and interactive. You'll need to be on top of your game of knowledge and cunning to truly succeed as a smuggler. What will you do to make CH2 the capital of Arrakis? And also watch another region more visually, because I am from Central Asia region. I find the Arrakis, Persianate, Farsi, Central Asian, sort of that Persianate architecture, and I like just spreading that around. That's why actually I want to be more expansionist and just paint the map, but I'll try to be more not that way with Smugglers in my next playthrough. It's already 50 minutes. I covered a lot. This is basically my everything before my gameplay, and I'll just stop it here. And the next video, I'll just right after the get-go, I'll start with my smuggler gameplay. Over and out.